Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And we are in the middle of the week. It's a Wednesday. Hope it's going well for you and wishing you a beautiful day. And get out there and enjoy it, but take us with you. We have a lot to talk about. Looking forward to our time with Greg and Julie Alexander today. We're going to be talking about communication in marriage, or should we say lack thereof. We do a monthly marriage encounter with Greg and Julie Alexander. Each month we bring up a topic of interest and something that they are dealing with in their work as marriage coaches, and communication or lack thereof, again, is at the top of the list. So they have some great points they'd like to discuss. So that comes up right out of the gate, right after the news and the weather and all that good stuff. And then for Shrines and Wonders Wednesday, I'm going to take you to southeastern Umbria and the land of Saints Benedict and Saint Scholastica, the twins from Nursia. Of course, they were buried in Monte Cassino, but they were born in Nursia. And Saint Benedict's feast day is coming up this week. So I want to talk about this amazing saint. And hopefully tomorrow we are going to be hearing from the head of the monastery, the Benedictine monks that live in Nursia, Father Abbot. I had the opportunity to meet him a few weeks ago. We went to Mass at their new chapel and church up in the mountains above Nursia. And he's just delightful. Of course, they're American, the majority of them. Some are Italian, some are from other places, but many of the monks are from America. And they have such a large following, not just of Italians and Europeans, but there are many Americans who actually have moved to this part of the world. They've started a school, and so the families love the way they teach the faith, and they want to be close to these amazing witnesses. And so they've got a lot of Americans and others that are moving here, and it's just quite fascinating. So we'll talk about the rebuilding of their monastery, which was, of course, in the parish that was devastated, St. Benedict's Cathedral, that was devastated in the earthquake back in 2016. It was 9 years ago. And it's really a strong memory for me and my friend Kelly Walquist, the founders of Wine. We had our first wine pilgrimage, Women in the New Evangelization, that year. And we were there in June, and it was a beautiful day. And I'll have a whole story related to that as well. But we came back, and then in August, the earthquake hit. And the city, the town of Nursia, is such a pretty place, but still struggling to rebuild. Now, the church is reopening soon. That's what the abbot told us. But anyway, hopefully we're going to have him on tomorrow. Communication is a little iffy because they're in the mountains and the cell phone connection is not that great. They don't have a landline, and we're trying to, with our wonderful producers and technicians in Irondale, trying to work this out with the good Padre, but we'll see what happens. Either way, we'll possibly maybe do a pre-record with him at some time. But being that, making a long story even longer, sorry to bore you with all the details, but being that the feast day is this week, I thought it would be cool to take you to that part of Umbria, because it's a part of Umbria, despite it being the birthplace of Saint Benedict, Saint Scholastica, and there's many other saints in that area of Italy, a lot of people don't go there, and they should, because it's quite lovely. So that will be our Shrines and Wonders Wednesday. And then we stay in Italy for the end of that first hour of the program today, where we meet with Joan Lewis. And we're going to be talking about the latest news with the Holy Father, and she's ready to discuss in detail life in Castel Gandolfo. She'll talk a little bit about that in terms of the Pope now vacationing again there in that beautiful place south of Rome. At 3 minutes past the hour, let's take a quick look at the weather. We have heavy rain still likely across the mid-Atlantic states today. Scattered strong to severe storms are expected across the mid-Atlantic and forecast to continue to be heavy to excessive. Numerous instances of flash flooding possible in southern Virginia and north central North Carolina. Severe storms are also possible across the northern Great Plains today. And then we have elevated to critical fire weather located across the Intermountain West. So that is a look at our forecast on this, a Wednesday, July 9th, 2025. It is time, though, right now, to check the news here on EWTN. We have the latest in the flash flood story from Texas. The governor, Greg Abbott, taking an aerial view of the historic flood damage yesterday in the Hill Country.
When you're in the air, you get a fuller perspective of how widespread, how catastrophic the damage is, and what must be done to fully address it.
He says the death toll statewide now sits at least 109 people. That, he says, is more than Hurricane Harvey. Search and rescue crews are still out there hunting for 161 people that have been reported missing, and more, he says, could be added to that list. And the Kerrville mayor, Joe Herring Jr., says he's still trying to process everything that's happened.
There's some anger, of course. I lost 2 friends in this flood, and I would do anything to have warned them that the river was away. I would do anything.
Officials say rescue operations have faced extremely treacherous conditions. There are still 5 campers and 1 counselor missing from that girls' camp in Kirk County, where 27 girls and counselors died. While there's a chance for some rain today, the region is forecast to get a break, though, from the storms. And Mexican rescue workers are helping crews in Texas respond to those catastrophic floods that hit the state over the weekend. On Tuesday, a spokesperson in northern Mexico announced a rescue team had been sent to the Kirk County area. The team is made up of members of the city's protective and firefighting units and assisting with search and rescue efforts. And again, over 100 people have been killed in the floods and over 160 remain missing, as the governor of Texas said. And there are reports now of injuries after serious flooding in the state of New Mexico in the southeastern part. The National Weather Service issuing a flash flood emergency after heavy rain there caused flooding in burn scars from recent wildfires. The city's mayor, or the mayor in that area, says at least 3 people are missing, and emergency crews have made over 24 water rescues. At least 3 people have now been taken to the hospital, but no deaths have yet been reported. In other news, the Supreme Court will allow the Trump administration to resume plans to carry out mass job cuts across federal agencies. Justices lifting a district judge's order blocking that large-scale federal layoff that could impact hundreds of thousands of jobs. The High Court saying it was not assessing the legality of any specific plans for layoffs at federal agencies. The president signing an executive order back in February directing agencies to prepare for a government overhaul. And the White House confirming President Trump is sending out take-it-or-leave-it tariff offers to several countries this week. Correspondent Laura Westbrook says 2 of those letters were shown to reporters, with more posted to social media.
In the letters addressed to Shigeru Ishiba, Japan's Prime Minister, and Lee Jae-myung, South Korea's president, Trump added that if either country increased its tariffs in retaliation, then whatever the number you choose to raise them by will be added on to the 25% that we charge.
The deadline for new trade deals to be struck has been pushed back from July 9th to August 1st. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying the president's trade team has seen quite a few positive developments with several countries. Mark Mayfield tells us the State Department is investigating after someone using an AI-generated voice actually impersonated the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and contacted U.S. and foreign officials.
State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce said her department is aware of the reports.
The State Department, of course, is aware of this incident and is currently monitoring and addressing the matter.
The person contacted 3 foreign ministers and 2 U.S. officials in mid-June via the Signal messaging app and left voicemails for at least 2 of them. The cable also shared that the actor likely aimed to manipulate targeted individuals using AI-generated text and voice messages with the goal of gaining access to information or accounts. I'm Mark Mayfield.
A federal judge temporarily blocking the government's effort to defund Planned Parenthood by ordering the president's administration to continue funding the nation's largest abortion provider for at least the next 2 weeks. According to Catholic news agency, the court order signed by Judge Indira Talwani partially halts a provision in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that would have cut off Medicaid reimbursements for certain organizations that perform abortions. Trump signed the bill last week on the 4th of July holiday after it passed both chambers of Congress with support from most Republicans and 0 Democrats. The Planned Parenthood Federation of America, as CNA explained, sued the administration just 3 days after the president signed the bill into law, asking the court to issue a temporary restraining order blocking enforcement. Planned Parenthood's annual report for 2023 to last June in 2024 disclosing the abortion network receiving nearly $800 million in taxpayer funding in that period, which accounted for almost 40% of its total revenue. A large portion of these funds come from state and federal Medicaid reimbursements, and pro-life organizations, meanwhile, for decades, have been urging the federal government, as we reported here on Catholic Connection yesterday, and state governments to end all taxpayer funds for organizations that perform abortions. Legislation signed by Trump halts federal Medicaid reimbursements to those organizations for 1 year, but activists hope to make the policy shift permanent. Katie Glendaniel, the Director of Legal Affairs and Policy Counsel at Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, telling CNA that Planned Parenthood's lawsuit is a brazen defiance of elected leaders, both the president and Congress, who had every right to act on the will of the people to stop forced taxpayer funding of big abortion. Michael Kastner tells us the IRS now says churches can endorse political candidates without losing their tax-exempt status.
The change in a 7-decade-old policy known as the Johnson Amendment was noted in a new court filing Monday alongside the National Religious Broadcasters Group. It was part of a lawsuit settlement brought by the group and 2 Texas churches claiming the Johnson Amendment violated their First Amendment rights to freedom of speech and religion. A judge has yet to rule on the filing. I'm Michael Kastner.
And the IRS now says that actually nothing that happens at church or through a church's usual channels of communication on matters of faith can violate that amendment. Even a sermon that explicitly tells people in the pews to vote does not take part or intervene in a campaign, according to the IRS, at least not within the ordinary meaning of those words. The court filing, first reported by the New York Times, also signals a political victory for conservative Christians who have long opposed the Johnson Amendment. Meanwhile, according to a statement from the USCCB, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, the Catholic Church maintains its stance of not endorsing or opposing political candidates. The USCCB General Counsel also recommending maintaining the current stance of refraining from endorsing political candidates until additional guidance is provided by the IRS. Vatican News reporting 5 years after a fire destroyed the famed Parisian Cathedral of Notre Dame, its doors opening for pilgrims and visitors to once again marvel at its French Gothic architecture. 6 months since that reopening, of 6 million, more than 6 million people have gone through the cathedral's doors as of June of this year. On average, 35,000 people visit the Cathedral of Notre Dame each day. And the Vatican says if those numbers continue, attendance could reach 12 million by the end of this year, which means it would knock the Eiffel Tower out of the top spot for most visited monuments in France. This figure would also exceed the pre-fire numbers when 11 million people visited the cathedral each year. And there's a new ranking by World Atlas calling Wendy's the most unhealthy fast food restaurant in the country. That distinction can largely be blamed on things like its triple Baconator, Frosties, and fries. As far as worst offenders go, Sonic came in right behind Wendy's, followed by Taco Bell, Dairy Queen, and KFC. The list looked at restaurants that serve meals that can eclipse daily calorie limits in a single sitting. The rest of the top 10, from bad to even worse, goes like this: Quiznos, McDonald's, Smashburger, Little Caesars, and Chick-fil-A. It is a Wednesday morning. It's July 9th, 2025. Great to be with you on a Wednesday and every day, Monday through Friday here at Catholic Connection. So how is your communication with your spouse? We're going to talk about that with, of course, our friends Julie and Greg Alexander. Up next, it's a Wednesday and it's Mornings on Marriage, coming up in about 2 minutes. Stay tuned. My mother, Rosie Posey, would say in her Jersey accent, can we talk? We need to talk. But can we talk? Communication. It's always an issue in marriage, and folks who know all about that, not because they have communication issues, but because they help couples break through many issues, including communication. It is consistently identified, by the way, according to the research that Julie and Greg have done for this segment and in their work at the alexanderhouse.org, the number one issue most couples face in marriage. And the American Association for Marriage and Family Therapy says poor communication is cited as a major contributing factor to nearly 65% of divorces. Whether it's unresolved conflict, unmet expectations, or emotional disconnection, couples often struggle, the research shows, not because they talk too little, but because they don't know how to talk in a way that fosters understanding, connection, and love. So, Greg and Julie, thank you so much. And you did so much research. And I know you've got a lot of experience in dealing with couples who struggle with this. Greg, let me start with you. Why do you think communication, it's coming up so often, communication or lack thereof? What gives with this? Why do you think?
You know, a lot of times, Teresa, we come into our marriage relationships, bringing into our marriage whatever communication style we had in our parents' home growing up, be it good, bad, or indifferent. It's our way of communicating, if you will. Now, the sad part is that we both come from two different family of origins, and so that in and of itself demonstrates difficulties, conflict in the relationship. And so there is that need to be able to go back and kind of rewrite the ground rules, if you will. Sometimes as we work with couples, I joke and say rules of engagement, which is a military term, but how we need to engage in conversation with each other so that we can honestly and lovingly express our thoughts, feelings, wants, and desires, but also being able to listen to the thoughts, feelings, wants, and needs and desires of our spouse as well.
Julie, what are you seeing with wives in communication issues? What's coming up in your counseling?
Well, a lot of times, Teresa, even as we go back to Greg and myself, Greg was very honest and told me exactly how he felt and what was on his heart, and it sounded harsh at times, or I took it the wrong way. I took it as something that was just, I didn't want to hear it, or I thought bad, or I thought he was pointing fingers at me. In reality, I was just hearing it as a put down. And I came from a place where if there's any kind of arguments, if there's any kind of issues or disagreement, just go silent. Don't talk, because you don't want to bring about any uncomfortableness. And so we came from two totally different worlds, as he said. And so we don't work on communication because we don't think it's that important. And it's the foundation of everything. So one can be willing to go to all hours of the evening to try to get their point across, and the other one can say, yeah, I just want to run away from that because I don't want to deal with it and I want to hide from it. Neither one is good. Neither one is healthy. So it's coming to that understanding of how we're here to communicate to help one another, not only hear what's on my heart, but I want to know what's on your heart, and I want to know what you're dealing with and what you're going through. So it's communication doesn't mean it's a disagreement, or doesn't mean you have to listen to what I say and I'm always right. Communication is literally what it talks, communion, coming together to discuss, to understand, to allow God to be a part of our commitment, of our union, of our marriage, so we can then have a plan to move forward.
We're talking with Greg and Julie Alexander of the Alexander House. The alexanderhouse.org is their beautiful website, and they are marriage coaches, and they train couples to also work with other couples because they are very busy, and they have a great response because they're so down to earth and they're speaking from their own challenges that they had in their marriage. They've also written a beautiful book. You should get a copy of it, Marriage 911. Greg, you reference a particular scripture verse in the letter of St. James. Tell us about that.
Yes, and that verse, Teresa, says, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And when we look at that, too many times we think in communication, I just want to get across, again, my thoughts, my feelings, my wants, what's important to me in the relationship. But I always jokingly say God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth because we're supposed to listen twice as much as we speak. And again, really having that open heart and listening to our spouse, but not only listening, but responding to the hurts and pains that they're expressing. Again, as Julie mentioned, sometimes as we are communicating how we feel, the other person can very easily take it as an attack. And as a result, they launch back in defense. When in reality, what we need to do is listen to the other person, especially when it's negative things, which typically is what causes the problem. But again, we should want to know, what we're doing, what's on the heart of our beloved, so that we can address those issues and respond to what it is that they're expressing. And so I think, again, that scripture verse speaks specifically to that.
Mm-hmm. Now, you have so many great points in bringing this up, and we're going to have you on to finish this. I think we'd have to do another part 2 because we only have about 4 minutes left. But can we quickly have you go back and forth with the 3 pillars of communication: honesty, charity, and empathy? And Julie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, Teresa, honesty. Again, we should come. The intimacy starts in the marriage when you come in honesty and sharing what is literally on your heart, sharing the truth of what's going on, your concerns, your worries, but for the other person to hear and listen to, again, coming together to understand That's a huge part. We don't really communicate to understand. Greg talked about that. It seems like we're in a confrontation from the beginning because we're wanting to debate. The debate is the word that keeps coming with these couples that come to see us. They want to share their side. I want him to come over here. I want her to come over on my side. When in reality, both should share the truth in love to go in. And again, if there's one person that's hurting, they're both hurting. If we both can't communicate or one of us can't communicate, it's not winning in the marriage.
And then quite simply,
Greg.
the next one is charity. And it's all about the delivery, Teresa. It's how we speak to the other person, which should always be in a warm and loving manner. Because when we speak to someone, first of all, they're more inclined to listen if we're speaking in a charitable tone, but also they're more apt to respond to what we're saying for no other reason than the fact that it's been said in a loving way. Because any other way, again, it introduces strife into the relationship, and it just brings more conflict, more tension in the relationship, and we never get the opportunity to find that resolution.
And you hear this, Teresa, again, when you talk about, in Scripture, the truth in love. Truth by itself isn't honest, but with you don't put the love in it, then it's harsh, and it's hard to hear, and it's hard to listen to, because then it's it comes across as condemnation.
And then the final point is empathy, and that's for those times when we do find the other person in a less than good state, so to speak, and instead of us launching out or maybe even assuming that it's something we said and did, it's just to take a moment to put ourselves in our spouse's position to see what might have happened in the course of the day that has them in that negative space. And if need be, to approach the other person, say, clearly you're upset. May I ask, is it anything I've done? Or is there anything that the kids have done? Again, too many times we just assume, it must be me. And instead of charitably coming in and engaging in conversation, we kind of cop that passive-aggressive attitude, or we come back and introduce additional strife for no other reason than the fact that we assume that it must be me in a relationship. And again, all of these things can be circumvented, Teresa, by just being open and lovingly share with each other our thoughts, our feelings, our wants, our needs, and desires. And again, if it's anything that's of a negative nature, don't launch back in defense, or launch back and look for ways to respond to the hurt and pain so that you can help bring the other person back to that state of peace.
Yeah, and Teresa, I'll just reiterate what Greg said, empathy.
Sure,
a lot of people don't even know what that word is or how that looks.
Right.
But it's coming to the other and to say, I may not fully understand, but I want to be with you in this. So let's work it out. Let's talk. Let me hear you. And when we talk about hearing you, it's not just with the ears, it's listening with your heart.
This is just so important. And I think that the other point, and I know we're going to get into this in part 2, because there's so much more that we have time to really look at, because you have tools and you have some common pitfalls, and this is hugely important. So we're going to schedule the second half of this discussion in our next segment for Mornings on Marriage. But the more, and we can talk about this as well, Greg and Julie, we have to, I think if we stay close to Jesus, if we stay in Scripture, in the sacraments, and the closer we get to God, the better our communication is going to be, because we're going to get to know ourselves better, because God is going to reveal who we are if we continue to pray, and that is only going to help a relationship. I think a lot of problems stem from the fact that couples are coming at things without God at the center. So we could talk about that next time. Great job, you guys. Thank you so much for all your hard work that you do to help marriages. Greg and Julie Alexander, talking about communication. Can we talk? As Rosie would say, can we talk? We need to talk. And we will talk more about this next month on our next edition of Mornings on Marriage. Check out their super website, thealexanderhouse.org. So this Friday, we will celebrate in the One Holy Catholic and Apostolic Faith the feast day of the amazing Saint Benedict of Nursia, patron saint of Europe, an incredible saint. On July 11th, the Catholic Church celebrates the feast of Saint Benedict, the 6th century abbot who gave Christian monasticism its lasting foundation in Western Europe. That is just a very short summary of this amazing saint in the Catholic Church. We'll have a little bit more about him in just a minute. But he is from, as you just heard, Nursia. And Nursia is a beautiful, beautiful town, struggling actually to rebuild right now from the earthquake of 2016. but it's a beautiful town known for its meats. If you want to have a good meat dish, especially guanciale, the pork, the pig, the boar, all of that good stuff, and the sausages, you head to Nursia, or you buy products from Nursia when you're in Umbria or anywhere in the central part of Italy. A lovely, lovely medieval town. And the church that was devastated by the earthquake in 2016 actually sits on the birthplace, the home of Saints Benedict and Saint Scholastica. Now, he, of course, went off to build the monastery in Monte Cassino, and Saint Scholastica wanted to be by her brother, and so she moved her ministry there as well. And they're buried in Monte Cassino, which is in southern Lazio, very close to the border of Campania. It's beautiful. Now, that wasn't completely rebuilt after World War II because it was bombed heavily, so they had to rebuild it, but it's just fabulous. So 2 places you should put on your bucket list if you're interested in the amazing life of St. Benedict of Nursia. Of course, you should put Nursia there. And just remember, though, that the sightseeing will be limited because they're still rebuilding from the earthquake, although many more stores have opened, and the church is going to be reopening soon, which is good. But also, of course, Monte Cassino. Now, Monte Cassino's in Lazio. Nursia's in Umbria. It's in the southeastern part of Umbria. And if you think of where Assisi is going to be a little bit northwest of there. So you go from Assisi, it's a very common starting point for people, and you're going to head southeast, and you will hit or go by the exits for Montefalco, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous hill town not too far from Nursia, known for, of course, St. Clare of Montefalco, St. Clare of the Cross, but also the red wines in that region. Our favorite red wine from that area is the Sagrantino, okay? The red wine, the Montefalco Sagrantino wine, Montefalco Rosso. And then you will go by Spoleto. And Spoleto was very important in the life of St. Francis because he stopped there and he had a big moment with the Lord when he realized that he was not going to be in the army for God, for the Pope. A different type of army, battling evil and winning souls for the Lord. And then it's on to the town of Nursia. And as I mentioned, we are really hoping that this week we're going to be able to catch up with the head of the monastery that was rebuilt in the hills of Nursia above the city. And we had the opportunity to go there with our friends who live in Assisi a few weeks ago and had mass there and got to meet the abbot. And he's been in touch with our wonderful producers, and we're trying to work this out. The technology, though, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, in that part of the country might be a little bit difficult. But I did want to encourage you to look up more about St. Benedict and the beautiful area of Nursia. He, again, is considered, as a beautiful article in Catholic News Agency tells us, the father of Western monasticism, declared a co-patron of Europe, along with St. Cyril and Methodius. He's also the patron saint of Pope Benedict XVI pontificate. In a 2005 general audience, Pope Benedict XVI said, St. Benedict was a powerful reminder of the indispensable Christian roots of Europe. He cited the monk's instruction to prefer nothing to the love of Christ and asked his intercession to help us keep Christ firmly at the heart of our lives. Born to upper-class parents in modern-day Italy during the year 480, Benedict was sent to Rome to study the humanities. However, he soon became disgusted with the loose morals that prevailed among the students. Everything old is new again, right? Nothing new under the sun, as it says in Ecclesiastes. He soon became disgusted, and withdrawing from the city, he lived briefly with a group of monks, then as a hermit. Okay? The young man spent 3 years in solitude, facing and overcoming severe temptations through prayer. Only after doing so did he have the confidence to emerge as an organizer of monastic communities. His first monastery established in the valley near Mount Subasio, and that is in between Assisi and Nursia. It's the mountains that you see when you're going into the Assisi area. His monasteries became centers of education for children, a tradition that would continue in the order during his lifetime and beyond. His movement, like its forebears in the Christian East, attracted large numbers of people who were looking to live their faith more deeply. He then left Subasio for Monte Cassino, 80 miles south of Rome. The move was geographically, as Catholic News Agency explains, and spiritually significant, making a more public emergence of the Western monastic movement. Benedict destroyed a pagan temple atop the mountain and built 2 oratories in its place. It was most likely at Monte Cassino that the abbot drew up a rule of life, the famous rule of St. Benedict. But to get the sense for his love of the quiet and the peace and the simple life, before heading down to Monte Cassino, where both Benedict and Scholastica are buried, I think it's a real important step to visit Southeast Umbria first. Because that section of Southeast Umbria, and this is what Deacon Dominic and I were talking on the way there a few weeks ago, it's about 80 minutes from our home in central Umbria. It's just so dramatic. I mean, the mountains there are, I don't know, they just seem much larger, and they just jut into the sky, and they just come right at you, and the trees are massive, and there's streams, and it just lends itself to being in the middle of nature. And you really kind of get why he just found so much solace there before moving down to an even bigger place of such solace in southern Lazio. But again, Nursia is a beautiful, beautiful area, and the monks have rebuilt. They did have a lot of damage to their place in the city of Nursia, but they rebuilt on the top of the mountains above the city of Nursia, and you can visit it, and they do have Mass there daily, and many people go. And as I mentioned, many American families are moving there. The monks now have a school that they started, and many families are moving there because they so appreciate their teaching, their rule of the faith, and the way they are getting back to the basics of the faith. Of course, the Mass is in Latin, which is absolutely beautiful, and you have all the chanting. It's amazing. And it's just a wonderful place to go, even though the city itself still needs a lot of work. You can go down into the city and pick up your sausages and your guanciale, which is the cheek of the boar, which is very tasty for pasta sauces, by the way. And you can get your truffles, but most importantly, you need to get your prayer and go up the mountain and meet the monks of Nursia and learn more about St. Benedict and the rule of St. Benedict. St. Benedict's feast day is this Friday, July 11th. St. Benedict, pray for us. It is a Wednesday. That was our edition today of Shrines and Wonders Wednesday, based on the upcoming feast day of St. Benedict. I will be out on Friday, traveling back to Rome. Vanessa Denhagarmo, the lovely Vanessa, will be sitting in for me again as we travel back to the Eternal City and to lovely Fiumicino Airport and head back to the States over the weekend. We are going to go back to Italy, though, a little bit north, or actually south of Umbria, about 2 hours or so, to the city of Rome with our very own Joan Lewis. Actually, even further south, to the mountaintop town of Castel Gandolfo, where we find Pope Leo vacationing. We'll be right back. Heading to the town of Castel Gandolfo, south of Rome. Joan Lewis is going to take us there, of course, with her descriptions and her explanation of the Holy Father, now back at that area, using it again as a vacation home for the Pope, or place of respite. The town is just so excited, aren't they? The people, I've seen some great videos on the Vatican website, and the meet and greet with the Pope. It was just adorable.
Oh, my gosh, Teresa, to have a pope back in this papal town after, 12 years of not having a pope reside or even visit. Pope Francis was there once when he visited the just retired Benedict the 16th. But, I mean, the building, which overlooks Lake Albano, the gorgeous gardens and everything, it just would take your breath away. But it calms you down. It's this serene atmosphere. Whether you're inside the papal palace overlooking the lake, or you're walking through the gardens, or sitting on a bench somewhere like near the little goldfish pond where the papal mass was held this morning, the new mass formulation for care of creation. It's just your heart and your soul and your mind just delight in being in this kind of atmosphere. And it was such a shame. I always felt sorry for Pope Francis that he didn't seem to know and understand what a change of atmosphere could do to the heart and mind and soul. John the 23rd went very little. Oh, actually, interestingly enough, John the 23rd, in the few times that he went to Castel Gandolfo, he started two traditions as a pope. One, you'll love this, praying the Angelus with the faithful on Sundays in the inner courtyard. And then, of course, that came back to Rome. So we're looking at a lot of years there. And he also celebrated Mass, John the 23rd, in the parish church of St. Thomas at Villanova on the Feast of the Assumption. So, and we're going to have all those things reprised with, because we've already seen his schedule, with Pope Leo. So, but what I love is one of the words you and I have talked about, and I probably use the word serenity more than any other to describe what I feel about Pope Leo. He just exudes serenity, and he's in this wonderful spot that is so serene. And I'm just so glad he's going to have this time. He's going to think and work and write. He's probably just going to walk through the gardens and pray the rosary. I'd probably say several rosaries a day if I had that. And I think it's the silence too. It's not like going into some wonderful place in the center of Rome, but you're still surrounded by tourists. So it's the beauty of God's creation. It's the silence, and just knowing that, and this is a very, I'll be soon posting pictures and history of the papal villa and the grounds. And Teresa, I've been blessed to have so many wonderful moments, especially under John Paul
too.
And Benedict.
Me too. Not under John Paul, but more Benedict and Francis. But being a member of the Patrons of the Arts, we've had several events there, and I've also been there on tours. But I'll tell you, it's gorgeous. That whole area is just beautiful.
No, it really, really is. And I think there's something, no matter where you are in the world, there's something about water, overlooking a lake, even having maybe an oceanfront vacation home or something. Of course, the recent disaster in history in Texas is almost belying what I'm about to say. But in general, there's something calming about water. Or our summer home in Michigan, my family's summer home, was right on Lake Michigan. And just listening, my bedroom would overlook the lake, just listening to the waves at night, the cooling, the effect almost putting me to sleep, maybe it did, of the waves. So nature, God created something that man could never create. He could imitate it, but have never created the beauty of the earth that we know. And to have this kind of beauty, what's great about Castel Gandolfo and the other small towns nearby, Nemi and Rocca di Papa and so forth, is that they're generally cooler than Rome would be, as we've had experienced the last 2 or 3 weeks, these, scorching days. So if you want to get away, you might go to the beach, but chances are if you want cooler weather, you went to some of these little hill towns. And that's where a lot of Romans, they'll have a second home. And they want to get away from Rome or Milan or Florence, any of the other places that have such huge heat, But I loved this morning I saw some of the video, and we'll be posting a link to the Pope's Mass in the gardens of Villa Barberini. Now, Villa Barberini, as a piece of land, actually became part of the Holy See with the 1929 Lateran Treaty between Italy and the Vatican. But a big part of the land of what is called Villa Barberini, because the word villa, by the way, it can refer to what a lot of Americans live in, a single detached family home. So we might call it a house or home, and villa would be the word. But the word villa also refers to a big park. And so Villa Barberini, in this sense, refers to the grounds, the gardens, and the farm. The farm, because the Holy See has a big farm at Castel Gandolfo. I had a wonderful tour one afternoon and brought back a lot of their products. They were given to me. For example, yogurt that they make, butter. In the fall, they have oil, and that's all sold in the Vatican supermarket. So, but Teresa, there's like 60 people. Some of the pictures that I posted yesterday. You're going to want to go back to my blog because there's like 60 people that work in the farm, but also in the gardens. They're the tree trimmers, the gardeners, and all these, the fancy names for people who work with the earth. But they do stunning work, just stunning work. And you have to have that number of people for 136 acres, which is what Castel Gandolfo is. It's bigger than Vatican City State, by the way, in Rome. Vatican City is 109 acres, and Castel Gandolfo is 136. So, but just big, beautiful.
Do you think? Yeah, I just wanted to ask you a question. I mean to interrupt you, but do you think that more people now, because I always suggest to people go to Castel Gandolfo, especially if they don't have a chance to, if they're visiting Rome, let's say, and they only have, let's say, a week and they can't go to another place, but they really want to get out of the city. Castel Gandolfo is a perfect break from that, even though, previous Holy Father Pope Francis did not use it as a summer vacation place. It's still a beautiful area. Are you hearing, I would imagine, even though it's fairly recent, that more pilgrims, more tourists are heading there because the interest is coming back up again, is increasing again?
Oh, sure.
Is it Pope Leo?
They are, and now today is not an example with this Mass that he said because it was private. It was not reciting the Angelus, or then he'll have a Mass. He will have a Mass in town in July, and then when he comes back in August for the Assumption. And so you're going to see the crowds then. A lot of them will be local people because they're so rejoicing in having a pope there. And then other people, I'm trying to arrange a trip to Castel Gandolfo, hopefully tomorrow, with two friends of mine who are in town. And just to let them see this little town, experience the sitting at a little place having a glass of wine overlooking Lake Albano, an extinct volcano. So you're going to have people go simply because it once again is associated with a pope living there, spending time there. Now, the thing is, you can still visit. Pope Leo is not in the original apostolic palace that is right there on the main square of Castel Gandolfo, the main entrance to the papal palace is there. That's where John Paul lived. That's where Benedict lived, and the popes before them. But because Pope Francis turned that building, and pardon my editorial comment, but sadly, into a museum, people do come to Castel Gandolfo to see that as a museum. But they are not going to see the Pope is in another building on the premises. And there's a different kind of building, homes for all the gardeners and so forth, or for some of the gardeners. And then there's apartments, which I got to see a number of years ago with the then director of the Papal Villas. There's all these smaller apartments that when John Paul or Benedict would go for a month or two in the summer, you'd have your Secretary of State being out there. You'd have the, head of the Office of Appointments, etc. So you'd have those cardinals, archbishops, whoever they were at the time, come out and also live on the land and meet with the Pope. And so it was kind of even a mini vacation for them. And the Pope will be staying in one of the other buildings, but not the main papal palace. And it's on the grounds today, what's called the Laudato Si, of course, the papal document on creation, the Laudato Si Borgo. And Borgo really refers to a small street, to be honest with you. So I don't know if his views are the same from the apartment that he has there, because like the papal bedroom and office and chapel in the main palace overlooks Lake Albano. And I don't know about the precise views that he has from, maybe the Vatican will be giving us somewhat of an idea, maybe not. But I'll post whatever pictures I have. Very few are of the same building he's in right now. So it's exciting and just I think everything about the new Pope is so exciting to people. He's so multilingual. He just seems at home, Teresa, wherever he goes.
Yeah. He does. It doesn't seem like there's a big adjustment for him. He just seemed to naturally go into that role. And I love what you said early on in our segment today, Joni, where you mentioned he's so peaceful. That is the first thing I sensed when we were there along the Via della Conciliazione and we heard the words Habemus Papam, and he came out and he said, "Peace be with you." He exuded that peace. He really did.
Exactly. And it's just everything about him, the words we use to describe him, everything about him transmits itself to us. His serenity, his feeling of peace. I mean, he's been Pope now 2 months and 1 day. And it
wow.
Seems like,
it's been 2 months already?
Yes. So May to June to July 8th. Yeah. Today's the 9th. So, where has that time gone? Because he just fits so perfectly and naturally into the role. And when you think of the Lord, the Holy Spirit, just all of his life up till that moment, the afternoon of May 8th, was preparing him for this. His life as a missionary, his life as an Augustinian, his studies as a mathematician, his studies as a canon lawyer. So many little parts of his life were all these wonderful, colorful, important mosaics. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, the mosaics become Pope Leo on May 8th, 2025.
Yeah.
So a beautiful picture that the Lord has painted, and we all are obviously praying for him that all the qualities he's known for right now simply become reinforced, because those beautiful qualities are reinforcing us in our faith as Catholics and in his teachings. And so...
Well said, my dear. Great way to wrap up the segment. Well, next week, God willing, I'll be talking to you back in the United States of America. So we are heading back to the United States this weekend. So I look forward to talking to you from southeastern Michigan. Our very own Joan Lewis, based in Rome. Joan's Rome at WordPress.com. Check out that great blog. We'll be right back. Five minutes past the hour. Thanks for tuning to the first hour of Catholic Connection on a Wednesday morning, July 9th, 2025. Next hour, straight up on EWTN Radio Extra. Very excited to talk to you about an interesting article I came across regarding the importance of being able to confess your sins. Now, this is actually an article that was on the Christian Post, and how discipline and getting people to own up to their wrongdoing is pretty much no longer practiced in most Protestant churches. And it's a very, as I said, interesting and compelling report. There was a survey done, and at the end of this report, it talks about how important it is to get people to confess to their sins. Now, obviously, they don't believe in the sacrament of reconciliation, but it lends a lot of credibility and credence, not that we need it, to the sacrament. And I also found a beautiful video of a wonderful priest, and you know him well, Father Jeffrey Kirby from South Carolina. He's an author, he's a speaker, he has a big following online, and he has a really great video about the importance of confession. So the Protestants understand that we need to confess our sins. They don't just agree with the way we do this. And also, I think not enough of them, this is my personal opinion, embrace it in terms of why it is so crucial. We'll discuss that in 2 cents. And then we're going to take a look at a big story. We're going to be talking with the attorney that worked on a huge case at Notre Dame University. The Irish Rover newspaper defeats a professor in defamation case. A professor who was working at the university, a Catholic school, talking all about abortion. Then she turns around and sues her defamation.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Hope you're having a beautiful Wednesday. Thanks for tuning in to our number 2, Due, as we say here in Bella Italia 2, here on EWTN's Radio Extra channel. Coming up after the weather and the news, We are going to have our 2 cents segment, T's 2 cents. And as I mentioned, if you were listening to the first hour, I found a very, very interesting article that was just posted yesterday on ChristianPost.com. Church discipline no longer practiced in most Protestant churches, a survey says. While most Protestant churches have policies in place to address significant misbehavior by members, formalized church discipline is rarely practiced, according to newly released data from Lifeway Research. So we'll read a little bit more of this article, and then I want to talk about why I'm so grateful for the sacrament of reconciliation. Now, obviously, in the Catholic Church, you do need to go to confession at least once a year. That's mandatory. And hopefully, when you're receiving Jesus, you've already gone to confession and you are in a state of grace. And that's extremely crucial as well, according to our teachings of the church. But we are not going to be hitting you over the head and forcing you into the confessional. That has to be done on your own free will. And you have to be willing to do this, because when you go into that confessional, you need a contrite heart. And when you have a contrite heart, things happen. Things change. When you open that heart up to the forgiveness of the Lord, everything changes. And the last line in this article is very interesting. Confronting unconfessed sin is both for the benefit of the local church and the individual. Most churches look to follow biblical guidelines in these cases. Well, you know what? Who does that in the utmost? We do, in the one holy Catholic and apostolic faith. And it's very, very biblical confession. Okay? So we'll talk about that, and then sharing a wonderful video, as I said, with a beautiful priest, Jeffrey Kirby from South Carolina. He's a theologian, he's an author, he's a speaker, and he's extremely articulate. He's been on this program at EWTN many times in confessing the faith. I tried to find a video of Father Wade, because I love him, and he's got a book about this too. I got to have him back on. Just reminded me in my head, I'm talking to myself here, that maybe I can send him this article and get his comments on it. I think that will be great. Anyhow, we will also be talking about a very interesting story out of Notre Dame University. Have you been following the case of this professor who works at Notre Dame, and she claims to be Catholic, but the Irish Rover newspaper covered her speaking and making comments publicly about abortion, basically saying that she was in favor, I'm paraphrasing greatly, and that she was talking about different services that were available to students regarding abortion. And so the students wrote a story based on what she said and did in the public realm. And basically, just reported what she was saying. And then she turns around and sues him for defamation. And this case went on for some time. But in the end, the truth won out. Irish Rover defeats Notre Dame professor in defamation case. And we'll talk to the attorney who handled that case. And that's coming up also on the second hour of Catholic Connection on the EWTN Extra channel. Okay, weather-wise, National Weather Service saying scattered strong to severe thunderstorms are expected today across the Middle Atlantic, and forecast to contain heavy to excessive rainfall. Numerous instances of flash flooding are possible in southern Virginia and north-central North Carolina. Severe thunderstorms are also possible across the northern Great Plains today. And then we have a chance of elevated to critical fire weather located across the Intermountain West. That's a look at our rundown, as we say in the biz, and the weather on a Wednesday morning. It is July 9th, 2025. Great to have you along. We need to get to the news, though, including an update on the horrible situation in Texas, and we'll do that right now here on EWTN. Texas Governor Greg Abbott taking an aerial view of the historic flood damage in the Hill Country yesterday.
When you're in the air, you get a fuller perspective of how widespread, how catastrophic the damage is, and what must be done to fully address it.
He says a death toll statewide now sits at least 109. That, he says, is more than Hurricane Harvey. Search and rescue crews, he says, are still hunting for 161 people that have been reported missing, and more, he says, could be added to that list. And the mayor of Kerrville, Joe Herring Jr., says amidst all of this, he's still trying to process everything that's been happening.
There's some anger, of course. I lost 2 friends in this flood. And I would do anything to have warned them that the river was away. I would do anything.
Officials say rescue operations have faced extremely treacherous conditions. There are still 5 campers and 1 counselor missing from a girls' camp where 27 girls and counselors died as well. While there's a chance for some rain today, the region is forecast to get a break from the storms. Mexican rescue workers, meanwhile, are helping crews in Texas respond to catastrophic floods that hit the state over the weekend. On Tuesday, a spokesperson for the city of Acuña in northern Mexico announced a rescue team had been sent to the area of Kerr County. The team made up of members of the city's civil protection and firefighting units assisting with search and rescue efforts. Again, over 100 people have been killed and over 160 remain missing. Meanwhile, there are some reports of injuries after serious flooding in New Mexico in the southeastern part of the state. The National Weather Service issuing a flash flood emergency after heavy rain caused flooding in burn scars from recent wildfires. Officials there say at least 3 people are missing, and emergency crews have made over 24 water rescues. At least 3 people have been taken to the hospital. No deaths yet have been reported. The Supreme Court will allow the Trump administration to resume plans to carry out mass job cuts across federal agencies. Justices lifting a district judge's order blocking the large-scale federal layoffs that could potentially impact hundreds of thousands of jobs. The Supreme Court saying it was not assessing, though, the legality of any specific plans for layoffs at the federal agencies. The president signing an executive order in February directing agencies to prepare for the government overhaul. And the White House confirming the president is sending out take-it-or-leave-it tariff offers to several countries this week. Correspondent Laura Westbrook says 2 of those letters were shown to reporters, with more later posted to social media.
In the letters addressed to Shigeru Ishiba, Japan's Prime Minister, and Lee Jae-myung, South Korea's president, Trump added that if either country increased its tariffs in retaliation, then whatever the number you choose to raise them by will be added on to the 25% that we charge.
The deadline for new trade deals to be struck has been pushed back from today to August 1st. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says Trump's trade team has seen a lot of positive developments with several countries. And Mark Mayfield explains the State Department is now investigating after someone using an AI-generated voice impersonated the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and contacted U.S. and foreign officials.
State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce said her department is aware of the reports.
The State Department, of course, is aware of this incident and is currently monitoring and addressing the matter.
The person contacted 3 foreign ministers and 2 U.S. officials in mid-June via the Signal messaging app and left voicemails for at least 2 of them. The cable also shared that the actor likely aimed to manipulate targeted individuals using AI-generated text and voice messages with the goal of gaining access to information or accounts. I'm Mark Mayfield.
A federal judge temporarily blocking the government's efforts to defund Planned Parenthood, ordering President Trump's administration to continue funding the nation's largest abortion provider for at least the next 2 weeks. As Catholic News Agency explains, a court order signed by Judge Indira Talwani partially halts a provision in the One Big Beautiful Act that would have cut off Medicaid reimbursements for certain organizations that perform abortions. Trump signing the bill on July 4th after it passed both chambers of Congress, with support from most Republicans and 0 Democrats. The Planned Parenthood Federation of America suing the administration just 3 days after the bill was signed into law and asked the court to issue a temporary restraining order blocking enforcement. Planned Parenthood's annual report for July of 23 to June of 24 disclosing that the abortion network received nearly $800 million in taxpayer funding in that period, accounting for almost 40% of its total revenue. A large portion of those funds come from state and federal Medicaid reimbursements. Pro-life organizations, meanwhile, for decades urging the federal government and state governments to end all taxpayer funding for organizations that perform abortions. Legislation signed by Trump halts federal Medicaid reimbursements to those organizations for 1 year, but activists are hoping to make the policy shift permanent. Katie Glendaniel, the Director of Legal Affairs and Policy Counsel at the Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America Group, told CNA Planned Parenthood's lawsuit is a brazen defiance of elected leaders, both the president and Congress, who had every right to act on the will of the people to stop forced taxpayer funding of big abortion. And the IRS now says churches can endorse political candidates without losing their tax-exempt status, as Michael Kastner brings us up to date on that story.
The change in a 7-decade-old policy known as the Johnson Amendment was noted in a new court filing Monday alongside the National Religious Broadcasters Group. It was part of a lawsuit settlement brought by the group and 2 Texas churches claiming the Johnson Amendment violated their First Amendment rights to freedom of speech and religion. A judge has yet to rule on the filing. I'm Michael Kastner.
Meanwhile, the IRS now says actually nothing that happens at church or through a church's usual channels of communication on matters of faith can violate the Johnson Amendment. Even a sermon that explicitly tells people in the pews how to vote does not take part or intervene in a campaign, according to the IRS, at least not within the ordinary meaning of those words. The court filing also signals a political victory for conservative Christians who have long opposed the Johnson Amendment. According to a statement, meanwhile, from the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, the Catholic Church will maintain its stance of not endorsing or opposing political candidates. The USCCB General Counsel also recommending maintaining our current stance of refraining from endorsing political candidates until additional guidance is provided by the IRS. And 5 years after a fire destroyed the famed Parisian Cathedral of Notre Dame, its doors opened, Vatican News tells us, for pilgrims and visitors to once again marvel at the Gothic architecture. And now, 6 months since the reopening on December 7th, a total of 6,015,000 people have gone through the doors as of June 30th, 2025. An average 35,000 people visiting every day. The Vatican News Agency telling us if those numbers continue, attendance could reach 12 million by the end of this year. And that means, they say, it would knock the Eiffel Tower off the top spot from the most visited monuments in France. And there's a new ranking by World Atlas calling Wendy's the most unhealthy fast food restaurant in America. That distinction can largely be blamed, they say, on things like its triple Baconator, Frosties, and fries. As far as worst offenders go, Sonic comes in right behind Wendy's, followed by Taco Bell, Dairy Queen, and KFC. The list looked at restaurants that serve meals that can eclipse daily calorie limits in just a single sitting. The rest of the top 10, if you're going to be going out for lunch today, keep this in mind. From bad to even worse, Quiznos, McDonald's, Smashburger, Little Caesars, and even Chick-fil-A. So there you go. The Baconator. Just listening to that, I feel like I should just put it on my hips because it's just calories without even eating it. Anyway, thanks so much for tuning into the second hour of Catholic Connection. It's EWTN Radio Extra. When we come back, talking about the beautiful sacrament of reconciliation and why it is so necessary. Psychologically, spiritually, physically, when you hear those words, it makes such a difference. And the Protestants recognize that, but they say confession in their world, of course it's much different, is not going on much at all. And it needs to be. Very interesting indeed. We'll discuss up next. So one of my besties, Kelly Walquist, who's the foundress of a beautiful ministry called Wine, Women in the New Evangelization. They do regional and national conferences. They help women's ministries. We do pilgrimages. We've got one coming up that's sold out this fall. We've got another one next year. We're excited about that. But I remember her telling me about a local event that she did, I think it was in Minnesota, Why We Need Maury Povich, and the whole thing was all about confession. So you see these TV shows, right? You have these shows, I don't even know if Maury Povich is still on the air, but you see these shows where people are just doing these confessions, and they're confronting other people, and people are coming out and finally being honest about a situation they should have been honest about a long time ago. Why is that? And why do we watch them? And the meaning and the thought process, which I thought was fascinating behind this conference that they had, was to look at the beauty. And really, if you look at the scientific evidence for confession in terms of what it does to you psychologically, spiritually, I don't have time to go into that now, but there's plenty of evidence. Dr. Ray Guarendi can tell you a little about that. He's talked about this quite a bit. But I think it is very important for us to understand the gifts that we've been given in the church. And the sacrament of reconciliation is a huge gift, a huge gift. And I don't think we take advantage of it enough. I know I don't. I try when I'm back in the United States to get to confession once a month. Doesn't always work out that way. I kind of find, according to my spiritual director, that once a month, once every 6 weeks is usually pretty helpful. But I went to this article. I love going to these I go to a lot of different sources when I'm looking for topics or discussion, just trying to find out what's going on in both the Catholic world and the non-Catholic world, the Christian world. And I found this article on ChristianPost.com, and it was just posted actually yesterday. Church discipline no longer practiced in most Protestant churches. So I did read the whole article, and I'll share some key points with you. But what really struck me was the last line. Confronting unconfessed sin is both for the benefit of the local church and the individual. Bingo. Bingo. Because think about this. If you are keeping something in, especially, God forbid, if it's a mortal sin, your psyche does not allow you to do that without having some sort of a fallout. Remember that famous story, The Telltale Heart? And you see this being played out even in movies and whatnot and on TV shows. We have to get that out. It's just a natural process of the mind, of the soul. And so personally, you're affected. And if you're affected personally, what is that going to do? If you're on edge, if you are dealing with a serious sin, it affects other people around you. Sin is not singular. People think it is, but it's not. If you are, God forbid, engaging in the grave sin of pornography, you're not only harming your own soul because it is a grave sin, but people in that industry are being used. Their bodies are being used. They're being exploited. So you're impacting that, and you're spreading that by the use of it. If, God forbid, you are addicted to a substance, that's a problem for you physically. And it could cause, obviously, problems for others around you, especially if you get behind the wheel of a car, God forbid. So sin is never singular. And again, as this person said in this study, confronting unconfessed sin is both for the benefit of the local church and the individual. So not just the local church, it affects our community. The psychological well-being of people, which is connected to who we are spiritually, affects all of us. Okay? And that's why confession is so important for so many reasons. I could go on, but let me just read a little bit of this article because I find it interesting because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, not only in the Protestant world, but even sometimes in the Catholic world. People say, oh, I don't need to go to a priest to confess my sins. Well, yes, you do, at least once a year, but people need to understand it. The priest is Jesus in persona Christi. Jesus is forgiving you through that priest that is in the confessional. The article says, while most U.S. Protestant churches have policies in place to address significant misbehavior by members, formalized church discipline is rarely practiced, according to newly released data from Lifeway Research. The survey conducted among over 1,000 Protestant pastors between August and September of last year found that 1 in 6 pastors reported their church had disciplined a member in the past year. The infrequency of church discipline is not because church members aren't sinning, said Scott McConnell, executive director of Lifeway Research. Church discipline typically occurs when a member is not repentant for a sin or is no longer qualified for a role because of sin. More than half, 54% of pastors reported their churches have not formally disciplined a member during their tenure, nor are they aware of any previous instances. Now, when you are in the confessional, you will be given penance, okay? You will, if you're confessing your sins honestly, and if you're confessing big sins, the penance will probably be larger. But this is a form of correction for someone who is not acting correctly and is sinning against God and the church and others. And so with this in mind, I wanted to play a short video from a wonderful priest on the importance of confession and what it does for us and why it's necessary. It is from a wonderful priest who's been on this program many times, Father Jeffrey Kirby. He's a priest and moral theologian, writer, and pastor of Our Lady of Grace Parish in South Carolina. And here's what he has to say about the beautiful sacrament of reconciliation.
every day to follow the way of the Lord Jesus. We know that we're fallen, we're broken, we are works in progress. And we should be very comfortable admitting that, realizing the fact that God does not expect perfection from us in this life. He calls us to pursue a life of perfection, to seek holiness, but perfection will be something that most of us reach in eternity. Now, we have to keep fighting and keep doing our best, but we shouldn't be surprised when we fall, when we sin, when we have vice, evil in our lives. What are we supposed to do when that happens? Well, thanks be to God, the Lord Jesus left us a sacrament in which we can go and receive his mercy and healing. So we're talking about the sacrament of confession. And I want to really encourage you in your discipleship to go to confession frequently. My goodness, it is the ocean of mercy. It is the field hospital for healing. And the Lord has left it to us in order for us to avail ourselves of its graces. To go to the Lord Jesus. I'm dirty, I've fallen, I've sinned. And for him to clean us up, to remove our sin, to absolve us, to restore us, and then to heal us. This is a powerful gift that the Lord has given to us. And yet, dear friends, there are a lot of Christians who ignore the sacrament of confession. A lot of Catholic Christians who seem so busy and so distracted that here's this powerful resource, powerful spiritual gift given to us, and it's completely dismissed or ignored. We have to fix that. We have to make sure we realize, wait a minute, I don't have to feel this guilt. I don't have to have all this heaviness in my heart. I don't have to keep feeling all these consequences from my sin. I can go to the Lord Jesus and the sacrament of confession, and I can be cleaned, washed, healed, restored, have my sins taken away, and I can receive his grace, which makes me stronger, so that as I continue to try to fight sin, I have God's strength working with me. So the grace of the sacrament cannot be underestimated, and we need to go to confession more often, all of us. So I want to encourage you in your discipleship, make sure you frequently go to confession. Make sure you receive the mercy and the healing and the grace that the Lord Jesus wants to give you. And those are our thoughts for today, dear friends. I want to thank you for joining me. I encourage you to keep fighting a good fight. And remember, you can receive these daily reflections sent right to your inbox when you subscribe to dailydiscipleship.org. God bless you.
Thank you, Father. Father Kirby from South Carolina. A beautiful summary of the importance of confession and how it shouldn't be, of course, taken lightly. And unfortunately, as he explained, it often is. But it is there for us. It is a gift. And if we have our Protestant brothers and sisters recognizing this in a survey about how discipline needs to be done in many cases in their different churches, and yet we have this beautiful formal discipline way of disciplining ourselves, of hearing from a priest, hearing from Jesus speaking to that priest in persona Christi, and what we need to do to set things right. And remember, as the end of this article says, confronting unconfessed sin is both for the benefit of the church and the individual. And I would go further and say, society and the world. Sin is never singular. That's why confession is so powerful. It's a very, very important story that's been developing for a few years now. Talking about the Irish Rover newspaper. They defeated the Notre Dame professor in the defamation case, and James Bopp, we'll call him Jim, as he prefers, is a principal attorney at the Bopp Law Firm. And Jim, this is a really interesting story. Take us back to the beginning, because, I mean, these young reporters, I was so proud of them because they were doing a very good job in reporting what this professor at the university was actually saying in public, in a public forum about abortion, and basically they reported on it. They did their job at a Catholic university of reporting on this professor who was talking about abortion. And then, I mean, I'm summarizing, quickly, but she turns around and sues them for defamation. So let's take us back to the beginning and how this all happened.
Well, it happened because there's a Notre Dame professor in the sociology department named Tamara Kay. And she has been a very aggressive advocate of abortion access, trading, in our view, upon her relationship with Notre Dame, and has been widely published, both articles that she prepared and also in being interviewed. This was particularly so leading up to the Dobbs decision a couple of years ago, as we know, overturned Roe v. Wade. So she made herself basically a national spokesman for the abortion rights movement. Now, we have, of course, a student newspaper independent of Notre Dame, but made up of Notre Dame students who are dedicated to continuing a very robust Catholic, the very robust Catholic tradition of at Notre Dame that, of course, some would want to undermine by their activities and associations. So they had the audacity to report on two speeches that Professor Kay made. One right after the Dobbs decision. It was about, post-Dobbs, what do we do now with abortion access? And then the other one to the campus Democrats about a year later. Two different articles where they basically quoted what she said. The result was a lawsuit complaining that they defamed her by, ironically, calling her an advocate for abortion access. I mean, can you imagine? You would think that she would be very proud of recognition that she has so sought to achieve as a advocate for abortion access.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but in defamation, let me just ask you a question, because this is, I spent, 20 plus years in secular media, so I'm very familiar with, we'd have updates from our lawyers and our radio and TV stations about defamation and what that meant and how we had to be careful and everything. And defamation, the definition of it is damaging a reputation, but it comes with false and harmful statements. So they were reporting on what she said. I mean, she said it. I mean, that's what I don't understand. How could she even have the audacity to file a defamation lawsuit?
Well, because it has nothing to do with ultimately winning the lawsuit. What it has to do with is dragging these students through a year or two long lawsuit where they'd have to hire lawyers. They'd be involved in extensive discovery. She would try to access, all of their confidential information. The whole point of these cases, they're called SLAPP suits. The whole point of all these is not to win the case, but to punish the people by the process.
It's intimidation, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, by the process and intimidation. Now, you can imagine you're a sophomore at Notre Dame. In fact, I was involved when I was at IU, Indiana University. I was involved in a student newspaper independent of IU just like this. And could you imagine being sued by a professor, having to hire a lawyer, being dragged through a lawsuit, all because you reported on what she is saying and doing? Now, SLAPP suits are, something that has arisen over the years. And the classic SLAPP suit is where a rich corporation, let's say a Walmart, wants to put in a superstore right next to a subdivision. And the people in the subdivision, don't want the traffic and the noise and et cetera. And so at the rezoning hearing, they testify against changing the zoning that would allow Walmart to build their superstore. And then Walmart, what happens? Walmart sues them for defamation. Well, Walmart's not looking for, recover damages for what they said about him. What they're wanting to do is intimidate, these soccer moms in this subdivision to shut up and get out of the way, or they're going to be sued and punished by the process, not the winning of the case. Well, fortunately, so this is exactly what Professor Kay was all about, punishing these students, causing them harm and damage, and to shut them up. Well, fortunately in Indiana and now in some 30 some states, there are anti-SLAPP laws. And what that means is right at the very beginning, And this is, of course, when I got involved in the case at the very beginning. And the first thing we did under Indiana's anti-SLAPP law, we moved to dismiss it. And what it requires is, right at the beginning of the case, the plaintiff has to show at least they have some evidence and some legal basis. It's called a prima facie case. Some facts or some credible legal theory in order to proceed with the case. And if the plaintiff doesn't, the case is dismissed. That is exactly what happened in this case.
Wow. But strategic, the SLAPP is an acronym, Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation. We have to take a break in about a minute. Before we get to the break, though, Jim, are more of these lawsuits, are they toning down, or do you see them heating up in other areas in law? What do you think?
Well, they're particularly a problem if a state does not have an anti-SLAPP law, because these kind of SLAPP suits, these punishment lawsuits, and often are frivolous, as this case was frivolous, because, are still being brought. And that's some, 17 or 18 states that need to be, adopting these laws, because the whole point of these laws is to protect your First Amendment rights.
Right.
We have a student journalist publishing for a newspaper a public speech by a professor on a public issue. You don't get any more to the core of the First Amendment than that. All right?
Right.
And so these laws are based on, if the lawsuit, the defamation case in this case, is brought based upon the exercise of somebody's First Amendment rights, like a journalist publishing an article in a newspaper about a public issue, well, then you can file an anti-SLAPP motion.
Okay, Jim, hang on. We're going to take a break and dive more deeply into the results. But good news, the Rover defeated the professor in that defamation case, and we will get to the end of the story and the good news. More on that with Jim Bopp when we return. Let's continue the conversation with attorney Jim Bopp. He was the principal attorney representing this case, the Irish Rover defeating Notre Dame professor in defamation case. Big story, and it's been developing over the last few years. He's from the Bopp Law Firm. Okay, so Jim, we got the background of the story. This was definitely a SLAPP lawsuit, intimidation. But as I was saying to you during the break, it's to me, it's pretty ridiculous because, she's trying to intimidate these kids, but at the same time, anybody with half a brain reading all these stories saying, well, wait a minute, you're claiming defamation, which means that you're claiming false statements were made. That's the definition of defamation. And yet you have been very open about your stance on abortion, even though you work at a quote unquote Catholic university. So to me, she was harming herself, even though she was trying to harm the students in some way.
That's right. And it is really hard to get. Yes, and it's really hard to get your mind around a professor who for years was trying to make herself a national spokesman for abortion access, then suing a newspaper for publishing an article saying that she is an advocate for abortion access and claiming that is defamatory. And of course, the courts didn't buy it. First, in the trial court, after we filed our motion and the various pleadings, we got a special judge who is a former justice of the Indiana Supreme Court who'd retired, but still does work, judge work when necessary or useful, and so he was assigned the case, Stephen David, and he found that on every single point, the Irish Rover was correct. That on each of the claimed false statements, every single one was true. Secondly, that there was no defamatory statement among the alleged false statements. Of course, they were all true. because as I've described, she was complaining that they said that she was a advocate for abortion access, when of course she was, and she seemed to be quite proud of it. Next is that there was no damages that were associated at all with the articles that were published. And finally, when you have a public figure like her who's thrust herself into the public debate on abortion, that you have to show malice, which means that they knew that the not alleged false, but as we know were true, but the alleged false statements, that they knew they were false when they made them, or it was in reckless disregard of whether they were true or not. And the court said there's absolutely no evidence that they had any doubt whatsoever that what we know now are their true statements were false. So you cannot more devastatingly lose. I mean, all we had to do is win on 1 point of the 5. Well, we won on all 5 of the points. This could not have been a more frivolous complaint. The next step, of course, was...
This professor was... Sure, go ahead. Let me just ask a question that this just came to mind. Excuse me for interrupting, but do you think this professor was so used to being able to holding this position at a Catholic university and being able to say whatever she wants about abortion and thrust herself into this issue about which she obviously is very passionate in terms of her pro-abortion advocacy, and nobody calling her out on it? And so now she's saying, well, wait a minute, I've been doing this for so long. Who are you to tell me I shouldn't be doing this?
No question. There's a whiff of arrogance in the bringing of this case. You know, she was single-minded in wanting to punish, but the students, for paying attention to her and describing what she's doing publicly. But we know, I mean, the left is full of people that want to cancel anybody that disagrees with them, wants to punish them, wants to shut them down. And this is just another manifestation of that. How dare you, without my permission, report on what I'm saying publicly about an important issue? Well, the next step was the Court of Appeals, and of course the Court of Appeals decision was unanimous and agreed wholeheartedly with the trial court that there was no legal or factual basis for the defamation case that was brought by her, that it was properly dismissed, and the Indiana Supreme Court refused by a 4-1 vote, refused to hear an appeal on the matter. So where we are right now is before the appeals, but after the trial court decision, we petitioned for attorney's fees, because the other thing about the anti-SLAPP law is that if your case is dismissed because it is so frivolous, well, the idea is to make the defendant whole, and therefore you have an award of attorney's fees. We petitioned for $175,000 for the trial work, and we will soon be petitioning for probably another $100,000. And so she will get the opportunity to pay Irish Rover's legal fees.
Do you think, and by the way, we're talking with attorney Jim Bopp, who is the principal attorney at the Bopp Law Firm, about the Irish Rover case against the Notre Dame professor who sued the Irish Rover and lost her defamation case. Do you think she got some bad legal advice?
Well, I don't want to comment on that. I just know that when we've had 5 plus 3 plus 1, 9 judges who have looked at this, and only one seems to have any second thoughts about the fact that this was about the most frivolous lawsuit anybody has ever filed in my 52 years of practice that I have seen. So, wherever that takes her and her lawyer, I don't know, but it's just she is now responsible for considerable attorney's fees.
Wow. So how are the students? I know some of them have already graduated, but how are the students doing through all of this? I mean, if they're looking back, I mean, it had to be extremely stressful, as you said, Jim, for these kids.
Well, I had a wonderful opportunity finally to meet them in person at the breakfast of the Sycamore Trust at University of Notre Dame during reunion weekend. So I spoke at their breakfast, and they came, and I had a great pleasure meeting them. They all say that while it was very stressful and concerning, that to be subject to that and how, you never know where it goes for sure, they would all do it again, that it was right, it was appropriate, they are proud of what they have been able to accomplish, and their vindication is particularly sweet.
Yeah, and I think also it's just from a journalistic standpoint, here's some young people doing what a lot of reporters in the secular media should do, and that means they're being accurate. They checked and double-checked. I know because I interviewed one of the students who was involved in the suit when the whole thing first developed. And they really did their homework, and they made sure they had all the quotes accurate, and they were very, very diligent in doing really good journalism and attribution. Let's talk about SLAPP suits a little bit, because again, I want to remind folks, and people may not be that familiar with them, but the SLAPP word is actually an acronym: Strategic Lawsuits Against Public Participation, basically intimidation lawsuits. How long have the SLAPP laws been around, and was there a particular case, Jim, that instituted this acronym and really got the laws rolling?
Yeah, in the early 90s, there was a law review article written that used the acronym SLAPP. And interestingly, California was the first one to try to deal with these through an anti-SLAPP law. Now, it's rather unusual for California to come up with a good idea, even inadvertently, but they certainly did here by being the pioneer on developing anti-SLAPP laws. Since then, as I mentioned, 30-some states have adopted them, and importantly, at least to me, is the Uniform Law Commission has published for all the states a model anti-SLAPP law. I was privileged to serve on the committee that drafted that law. I'm a member of the Uniform Law Commission, and so for those states that don't have these laws, and for those states that have old laws, because the early versions really, now that we've had, several decades of experience with these, really need an update, both in terms of the extent of their protections and also, how the procedures that are involved. So even states with anti-SLAPP laws need to take a good look at them, compare it with the Uniform Law Commission, Uniform Law on anti-SLAPP, and then and update their law.
So all of this is pretty much done, except for getting those legal fees back for the students who fought for their rights for freedom of information and freedom of the press. I mean, they're getting their money back. I mean, that's a done deal.
Oh, yes. The case is over except for the award of attorney's fees. Now, understand, I took this case pro bono. I was willing to do it pro bono for them. I've mentioned already, I was in their very position at Indiana University in 1966 to 1970, working for a conservative, independent newspaper. I have great sympathy and respect for these kids that were involved in this, and hopeful that we would win, and if we prevail, not only would they be vindicated, but I would actually get paid, which needs to happen on occasion.
Well, I mean, I do think it's really, really important, though, that you were able to take this case on, and your personal experience, I think, probably was such a comfort to those students. I think it's really super important. I just think in this day and age, this sends a message, does it not, to these arrogant people who think, I am going to do what I want, say what I want whenever, and how dare you call me out on it, and if you do call me out on what I'm saying, I'm going to try to silence you and cancel you. Does this send, do you think, a message to people? I mean, what's been the positive fallout of this in that realm, Jim, before we let you go?
Well, I certainly hope so. And, we seem to have no shortage of people with those attitudes that you,
right.
and of course now we're seeing it escalate into violence when people don't get their way, don't like what people are doing. So we're in a perilous time, in my opinion. Both the First Amendment is the protection for people that actually dissent or express their own opinions. It seems to be more perilous. The willingness to take extreme measures on the left seems to be increasing. So there's going to be a lot more that is necessary than winning the Irish Rover case. But for those that are aware of it, it hopefully will cause people to think twice.
Well, Jim, we're glad that you're on our side. Thank you for the great work that you do, and not only for the students at the Irish Rover, but your work in general is so important. Jim Bopp, principal attorney at the Bopp Law Firm, talking about the Irish Rover defeating a pro-abortion Notre Dame professor on a defamation case. We'll be right back. Thanks so much for tuning into the second hour of Catholic Connection here on EWTN Radio Extra. Don't forget to follow all of our programs at EWTN Radio and also EWTN Television. And our news outlets for you: Catholic News Agency, The World Over with Raymond Arroyo, EWTN News Nightly, the National Catholic Register. So many great outlets that we have for you. EWTN News In Depth, Pro-Life Weekly, and on and on and on. We try to give you all the different stories that affect us as Catholics, and we think that we like what we do here. We really do, and we want to hear back from you in terms of what stories, what topics you'd like to see us cover more of. All right, coming up, speaking of coverage, tomorrow on a Thursday morning edition of Catholic Connection, of course, we'll have Father Mitch Pacwa with us for our cultural connections. And then it's going to be another priest that's going to be joining us. Actually, several priests in the program tomorrow, which is awesome. We do have a confirmation from Father Abbot Benedict of course, the monastery in Nursia. So excited about that. He'll be joining us off the top of the hour if our communication works. If not, we will give you the news in that point. Otherwise, Father Abbot will be on news and the latest developments, and he'll give us a take on the upcoming feast day of course, St. Benedict, which is Friday. And then Father Mitch Pacwa in the second hour of the program, this hour on EWTN Radio Extra, we're going to be talking about the prayer, the Lord's Prayer, and how important it is in our lives, but especially during the Jubilee year. Have a great Wednesday, and we'll talk to you, as we say in Italy, a domani, tomorrow on a Thursday. Ciao, ciao.